The email notification pinged on my phone at exactly 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I was sitting in my apartment in downtown Seattle, nursing a cup of coffee and reviewing quarterly reports that should have been someone else's responsibility. The subject line made my blood run cold. Immediate salary adjustment. Effective tomorrow. I opened it with trembling fingers, knowing deep down that my worst suspicions were about to be confirmed. But nothing could have prepared me for what I read next. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Marcus Chen, and until that Tuesday night, I thought I had the perfect job at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. For 3 years, I'd been their senior digital strategist, pulling in campaigns that generated millions in revenue for clients ranging from tech startups to Fortune 500 companies. My corner office on the 22nd floor of the Columbia Center had a view of Elliott Bay, and my annual salary of $95,000 felt like a solid foundation for the life I was building. The company was owned by Harrison Blackwood, a man in his early 50s who wore expensive suits and drove a Tesla Model S that probably cost more than most people's houses. Harrison had inherited the business from his father, and while he liked to present himself as a self-made entrepreneur, everyone knew the truth. He was riding on Daddy's coattails and desperately trying to prove himself worthy of the family legacy. Pinnacle Marketing Solutions occupied 3 floors of the Columbia Center, employing about 60 people across various departments. We had account managers, creative directors, data analysts, social media specialists, and a small army of junior associates who did most of the grunt work. The company culture was typical corporate America, lots of buzzwords about synergy and innovative solutions, but underneath it all was the harsh reality of billable hours and profit margin. I had joined Pinnacle straight out of graduate school, where I'd earned my MBA with a focus on digital marketing and consumer psychology. My first year was rough, long hours, demanding clients, and the constant pressure to prove myself in a competitive environment. But I was hungry, ambitious, and willing to do whatever it took to climb the corporate ladder. My breakthrough came during my second year when I landed the Meridian Electronics account. Meridian was a mid-sized consumer electronics company looking to revamp their entire digital presence. Their previous marketing firm had been stuck in the Stone Age, still relying heavily on print advertisements and basic website banners. I saw an opportunity to completely revolutionize their approach. I spent weeks researching their target demographic, analyzing competitor strategies, and developing a comprehensive multi-platform campaign. The proposal I presented wasn't just about increasing their online visibility. It was about creating an entirely new brand identity that would resonate with millennials and Gen Z consumers who were becoming their primary market. The campaign included everything from influencer partnerships and viral social media content to sophisticated retargeting strategies and interactive website experiences. I recommended they pivot away from traditional advertising channels and invest heavily in platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, where their target audience was already spending their time. Harrison was skeptical at first. He came from the old school of marketing, where success was measured by how many magazine ads you could afford, and whether your billboard was visible from the interstate. But the numbers I presented were impossible to ignore. My projections showed a potential 300% increase in online engagement and a 150% boost in sales within the first 6 months. The Meridian campaign launched on a Monday morning in March, and by Friday afternoon we were already seeing incredible results. Their social media followers had tripled, their website traffic was through the roof, and more importantly, their online sales were surging. The influencer partnerships I'd arranged were generating organic buzz that money couldn't buy, and the interactive elements of their website were keeping visitors engaged for an average of 12 minutes, unheard of in the industry. Within 3 months, Meridian's revenue had increased by 80%, and they were calling it the most successful marketing campaign in their company's history. Industry publications were writing articles about our innovative approach, and Harrison was suddenly fielding calls from potential clients who had heard about our success. That's when everything changed for me at Pinnacle. Harrison started treating me like his golden boy, giving me the biggest accounts and the most challenging projects. My salary jumped from $65,000 to $78,000, then to $85,000, and finally to $95,000 when I successfully landed 3 more major accounts in quick succession. But success came with a price. My workload became increasingly demanding, and I found myself staying late most nights and coming in on weekends. Harrison had a habit of calling me at all hours with urgent requests that usually turned out to be minor adjustments or last-minute changes that could have waited until business hours. The stress was taking its toll on my personal life. I'd been dating Sarah Williams, a nurse at Seattle Children's Hospital, for about 2 years. She was understanding about my career ambitions, but she was getting frustrated with my constant unavailability. Date nights were frequently canceled because of work emergencies, and I'd lost count of how many times I'd had to leave early from social gatherings to handle client crises. Despite the pressure, I genuinely enjoyed the work. There's something incredibly satisfying about taking a struggling brand and transforming it into a market leader. Each successful campaign felt like solving a complex puzzle, and the creative aspects of the job kept me engaged even during the most stressful period. My colleagues respected my expertise, and I developed a reputation as someone who could handle the impossible accounts, the ones that other agencies had given up on or refused to take. Harrison would regularly assign me the most difficult clients, knowing that I had a track record of turning challenging situations into success stories. One of my most memorable projects was with Cascade Outdoor Gear, a struggling camping equipment company that was losing market share to cheaper overseas competitors. They came to us as a last resort, with declining sales and a brand image that screamed outdated. Their website looked like it hadn't been updated since 2005, and their social media presence was practically non-existent. I developed a campaign that focused on the emotional connection between outdoor enthusiasts and their gear. Instead of competing on price, we positioned Cascade as the premium choice for serious adventurers who valued quality and durability over cheap alternatives. The campaign featured real outdoor enthusiasts sharing their stories and showcasing how Cascade gear had been part of their most memorable adventure. We partnered with popular outdoor YouTubers and Instagram influencers who had genuine followings in the hiking, camping, and mountaineering community. These weren't just sponsored posts. We created authentic content that told compelling stories about real people using Cascade products in challenging environments. The results were phenomenal. Within 6 months, Cascade's online sales had increased by 250%, and they were expanding their product line to meet growing demand. They went from being on the verge of bankruptcy to becoming one of the fastest-growing outdoor gear companies in the Pacific Northwest. Harrison was ecstatic about the success, and Cascade became one of our flagship case studies. We featured their transformation prominently on our website and in our pitch presentations to potential clients. The campaign won several industry awards, and I was invited to speak at marketing conferences about innovative branding strategies. But as my success grew, so did Harrison's expectation. He started assigning me multiple major accounts simultaneously, expecting the same level of attention and results for each one. My days became a constant juggling act of client meetings, strategy sessions, creative reviews, and crisis management. The breaking point came during the Northstar financial campaign. Northstar was a regional investment firm looking to expand into new markets, and they had extremely high expectations based on the success stories they'd heard about our other clients. Harrison had promised them results that frankly seemed unrealistic given their budget and timeline constraints. I spent months developing a comprehensive strategy that involved everything from content marketing and thought leadership to sophisticated digital advertising campaigns. The client was demanding, constantly requesting revisions and changes that would set back our timeline and increase costs. Harrison, eager to keep them happy, would agree to every request without considering the impact on our team or resources. The campaign required me to work 16-hour days for 3 straight weeks, coordinating with graphic designers, copywriters, web developers, and media buyers to bring everything together. I was surviving on coffee and determination, barely sleeping, and completely neglecting every other aspect of my life. Sarah finally confronted me about my work habits during what was supposed to be a romantic dinner at our favorite restaurant in Capitol Hill. I'd been checking my phone constantly throughout the meal, responding to client emails and coordinating with team members who were working late to meet an impossible deadline. "Marcus, this isn't sustainable," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You're killing yourself for a job that's consuming your entire life." When was the last time we had a conversation that didn't involve your work? I looked up from my phone, suddenly aware of how disconnected I'd become. She was right. Of course, I couldn't remember the last time I'd been fully present during our time together. Every conversation seemed to be interrupted by work calls or urgent emails, and I'd become the type of person I used to criticize, someone whose identity was completely wrapped up in their career. I know things have been crazy lately, I said, putting my phone face down on the table, but this project is huge for the company. Once we get through the launch, things will calm down. Sarah gave me a look that was equal parts frustration and sadness. That's what you said about the last 3 projects, and the ones before that. There's always going to be another big account, another impossible deadline, another crisis that only you can handle. She was absolutely right, but I didn't know how to change the situation. Harrison had made it clear that my value to the company was directly tied to my ability to deliver exceptional results under pressure. The moment I started saying no to difficult assignments or pushing back on unrealistic timelines, I'd be seen as less valuable, less committed, less worthy of the opportunities and compensation I'd worked so hard to achieve. The North Star campaign eventually launched, and like most of my projects, it exceeded expectations. Their brand awareness increased dramatically, they successfully entered 2 new markets, and their client acquisition rate improved by over. Harrison was thrilled with the results and immediately started talking about even bigger opportunities on the horizon. But I was exhausted, burned out, and beginning to question whether the success was worth the personal cost. I'd gained recognition and financial stability, but I'd lost touch with friends, strained my relationship with Sarah, and developed stress-related health issues that I was ignoring in favor of work commitments. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. That's when I started paying closer attention to the business side of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. As someone who was generating millions in revenue for the company, I became curious about how the profits were being distributed and whether my compensation truly reflected my contribution to the bottom line. What I discovered during my quiet investigation would change everything about how I viewed my role at the company and my relationship with Harrison Blackwood. My investigation into Pinnacle's finances began innocently enough. During late nights at the office, I started noticing discrepancies in client billing statements that crossed my desk. As the senior digital strategist handling the company's biggest accounts, I had access to project budgets and client invoices, but I'd never paid close attention to the profit margins until that exhausting period with North Star Financial. The first red flag appeared when I was reviewing the Meridian Electronics billing history. According to the invoices I could access, we were charging them $45,000 monthly for their comprehensive digital marketing package. However, the actual costs for executing their campaign, including my salary allocation, creative team hours, media buying, and overhead, totaled roughly $18,000 per month. That meant Pinnacle was generating 150% profit margin on my work alone. Initially, I assumed this was standard industry practice. Marketing agencies need healthy profit margins to survive, and I knew that client fees had to cover not just direct costs, but also business development, administrative expenses, and company growth. But curiosity got the better of me, and I started digging deeper into other accounts. The Cascade Outdoor Gear numbers were even more shocking. We were billing them $32,000 monthly, while the actual execution costs were approximately $12,000. The influencer partnerships I'd negotiated were being marked up by 200%, even though I was doing most of the relationship management myself. Harrison was essentially charging premium prices for my expertise, while paying me a fraction of the value I was generating. My detective work became more systematic. I started staying even later at the office, using my access to project management software and billing systems to piece together a comprehensive picture of how Pinnacle operated. What I discovered was a pattern that extended far beyond my own account. Harrison had structured the company to maximize profits by underpaying talented employees, while charging clients premium rates for their expertise. The junior associates were working 60-hour weeks for $35,000 annual salaries, handling tasks that clients were being billed $150 per hour. The creative team was generating award-winning campaigns, while earning significantly less than industry standards for their skill level. But the most disturbing revelation came when I accessed the company's overall financial report. Pinnacle Marketing Solutions was generating approximately $12 million in annual revenue, with operating expenses of roughly $4.8 million, that left $7.2 million in gross profit, most of which seemed to be flowing directly into Harrison's pockets and luxury business expenses. His Tesla wasn't just expensive, it was a $120,000 Model S Plaid that he'd purchased as a company vehicle. The same classification applied to his downtown Seattle penthouse, which was listed as a client entertainment space, despite being his primary residence. His frequent trips to industry conferences were actually luxury vacations, with minimal business purpose, all funded by the profits generated from our hard work. Meanwhile, the entire staff was operating under the assumption that the company was doing well, but not exceptionally profitable. Harrison regularly mentioned budget constraints when employees requested raises or additional resources. He'd established a culture where people felt grateful for their jobs and hesitant to push for better compensation. The most infuriating part was realizing how deliberately he'd manipulated the situation. During my annual reviews, Harrison would praise my exceptional performance while explaining that company-wide budget limitations prevented significant salary increases. He'd throw in occasional bonuses or perks to keep me satisfied, but always framed them as generous gestures rather than fair compensation for value created. My $95,000 salary suddenly felt insulting when I calculated that my direct work was generating over $800,000 in annual profit for the company. Even accounting for overhead, administrative costs, and reasonable business profits, I should have been earning at least $150,000 based on industry standards for someone with my track record and client portfolio. The investigation also revealed Harrison's long-term strategy for the company. He wasn't interested in building a sustainable business with happy, well-compensated employees. His goal was to maximize short-term profits while keeping expenses as low as possible, essentially treating talented staff as expendable resources rather than valuable assets. I found email exchanges between Harrison and his accountant discussing tax strategies and profit optimization techniques. There were conversations about restructuring employee classifications to avoid providing benefits, discussions about outsourcing creative work to cheaper freelancers, and plans to implement performance-based pay structures that would actually reduce overall compensation for most staff members. The breaking point in my investigation came when I discovered Harrison's exit strategy. Hidden in a folder labeled Strategic Planning were documents outlining his intention to sell Pinnacle Marketing Solutions within the next 2 years. He was working with business brokers to position the company as a highly profitable acquisition target, emphasizing the strong client relationships and proven revenue stream. But here's what made me absolutely furious. The sale documents listed key employees as assets, but made no mention of retention bonuses, equity sharing, or any plan to reward the people who had built the company's reputation. Harrison intended to sell our collective expertise and relationships for millions while leaving the entire staff to deal with whatever new ownership decided to do with their careers. I printed copies of the most damning documents and stored them in a secure location. The evidence included profit and loss statements, client billing records, Harrison's personal expense reports, and the preliminary sale documentation. If I ever needed to expose his practices, I had everything necessary to paint a complete picture of how he was exploiting his employees. But I didn't want to rush into any dramatic actions. Instead, I decided to use this information strategically, waiting for the right moment to leverage what I'd learned. I continued performing at the same high level, maintaining my professional relationships with clients, and building my reputation in the industry. During this period, I also started subtly documenting my contributions to each client account. I kept detailed records of strategy development, campaign performance metrics, client feedback, and revenue generation. If Harrison ever tried to diminish my role or take credit for my work, I'd have comprehensive evidence of my actual contribution. The documentation process revealed just how central I'd become to Pinnacle's success. Over the past 3 years, I'd been the primary strategist for accounts generating 60% of the company's total revenue. Clients regularly requested to work specifically with me, and several had mentioned they chose Pinnacle specifically because of campaigns I'd developed for other companies. This client loyalty gave me significant leverage that I hadn't fully appreciated before. If I were to leave Pinnacle and join a competitor, or start my own agency, many of these clients would likely follow. The non-compete clause in my employment contract had some restrictions, but it wasn't comprehensive enough to prevent me from working in the industry or maintaining professional relationships. I started quietly networking with other marketing professionals, attending industry events, and building relationships with potential partners or employers. My reputation in the Seattle marketing community was strong, and several agency owners had approached me over the years about joining their teams. I'd always politely declined, but now I began having more serious conversations about opportunity. One particularly interesting discussion was with Jennifer Rodriguez, the founder of Apex Creative Group, a boutique agency specializing in tech startups and innovative brands. Jennifer had built her company from the ground up over 8 years, focusing on sustainable growth and employee satisfaction rather than maximum profit extraction. During a coffee meeting in South Lake Union, Jennifer made an observation that stuck with me. The best marketing professionals don't just create successful campaigns, they build lasting relationships with clients who trust their expertise. That trust is incredibly valuable, and smart agencies recognize it as their most important asset. She was right, and it made me realize that Harrison had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of our business. He treated client relationships as company property rather than partnerships built on individual expertise and trust. While Pinnacle owned the contracts, the actual relationships were based on clients' confidence in specific team members' abilities to deliver results. This insight became the foundation for what would eventually become my exit strategy. But before I could develop any concrete plans, Harrison made a decision that would accelerate everything and force my hand in ways I never anticipated. The first hint of trouble came during a staff meeting in late September. Harrison announced that the company was optimizing operations to improve efficiency and competitiveness. He used a lot of corporate buzzwords to describe changes that sounded ominous but weren't specific enough to cause immediate panic. Over the following weeks, however, the real nature of these optimizations became clear. Harrison was systematically restructuring the company to reduce payroll expenses while maintaining the same client service levels. This meant fewer people doing more work for the same or lower compensation. The first casualties were 3 junior associates who were laid off and immediately replaced by freelancers earning significantly less per hour. Their responsibilities were redistributed among remaining staff members, effectively increasing everyone's workload without additional compensation. Next came changes to the benefits package. Harrison announced that the company was switching to a more flexible health insurance plan that shifted more costs to employees while reducing Pinnacle's contribution. The retirement matching program was suspended indefinitely due to market uncertainties. These changes were implemented gradually, with each announcement framed as a temporary adjustment or industry standard practice. Harrison was careful to avoid creating the impression of a company in crisis, instead presenting everything as proactive measures to ensure long-term stability and growth. But I could see the bigger picture. Harrison was preparing to maximize profits in advance of the company's sale, squeezing every possible dollar out of operations, while maintaining the revenue streams that made Pinnacle attractive to potential buyers. The staff reductions and benefit cuts would improve the profit margins that acquisition-minded companies would find appealing. The writing was on the wall, but I don't think anyone else fully understood what was happening. Most of my colleagues were focused on their immediate responsibilities and assumed the changes were temporary responses to economic pressures. They trusted Harrison's explanations and continued working hard, hoping that their loyalty and performance would be rewarded once things stabilized. I knew better. The financial documents I'd seen made it clear that these weren't temporary adjustments. They were permanent changes designed to extract maximum value from the company before Harrison cashed out. And I was certain that more dramatic changes were coming, changes that would directly impact my role and compensation. The question wasn't whether Harrison would eventually target my salary and benefits. It was when and how dramatically he'd try to reduce his highest-paid employees' compensation. I started preparing for that inevitability, developing contingency plans and strengthening my position in case I needed to make a quick exit. What I didn't anticipate was how sudden and brutal his approach would be, or how perfectly it would align with the exit strategy I'd been quietly developing. Sometimes the best revenge comes from being prepared for exactly the kind of betrayal you know is coming. The email that changed everything arrived at 11:47 p.m. on that Tuesday night in October. I was reviewing the quarterly performance reports for our 3 biggest accounts when my phone buzzed with Harrison's message. The subject line alone made my stomach drop. Immediate salary adjustment, effective tomorrow. I set down my coffee cup and opened the email with trembling fingers. What I read was even worse than my worst-case scenario predictions. Marcus, after careful review of current market conditions and company restructuring needs, we're implementing immediate cost optimization measures across all departments. Effective tomorrow, your annual compensation will be adjusted to $47,500, representing a more sustainable allocation of resources during this transition period. This decision reflects current industry standards for digital marketing roles and aligns with our commitment to operational efficiency. Your dedication to the company has been noted, and we look forward to your continued contributions at this adjusted compensation level. Please see HR tomorrow morning to discuss the updated terms of your employment. Best regards, Harrison Blackwood, CEO. I read the email 3 times before the full impact hit me. Harrison had just cut my salary from $95,000 to $47,500, exactly half, with zero notice, zero explanation beyond corporate buzzwords, and zero acknowledgement of my actual contribution to the company's success. The casual tone of the message was almost more insulting than the salary cut itself. Your dedication has been noted, as if 3 years of generating millions in revenue deserved nothing more than a polite acknowledgement. The reference to current industry standards was laughably false. Experienced digital strategists with my track record typically earned between $120,000 and $180,000 annually in the Seattle market. But the phrase that really ignited my anger was continued contributions at this adjusted compensation level. Harrison wasn't just cutting my pay, he was expecting me to maintain the same performance, handle the same demanding clients, and work the same insane hours for literally half the money. I sat in my apartment staring at the email, feeling a mixture of rage, betrayal, and something approaching relief. Relief because Harrison had finally shown his true colors so blatantly that there was no room for doubt or second guessing. This wasn't a temporary adjustment or a response to genuine financial difficulties. This was pure exploitation, and it gave me complete moral justification for everything I was about to do. Sleep was impossible that night. I spent hours pacing around my apartment, alternating between fury at Harrison's audacity and excitement about implementing the exit strategy I'd been developing. By 3 a.m., I had made my decision. By 6 a.m., I had a detailed plan. The first step was documentation. I needed to create an unassailable record of my contributions to Pinnacle before Harrison could attempt to revise history or minimize my role. I arrived at the office early and began systematically copying files, client communications, campaign performance data, and strategic documents that proved my direct involvement in every major success story. The Meridian Electronics campaign alone had generated over $2.4 million in revenue for Pinnacle during my tenure. I had the original strategy documents, client testimonials, performance metrics, and award certificates that proved my central role in their transformation. Cascade Outdoor Gear represented another $1.8 million in revenue, with similar documentation of my strategic leadership. But I wasn't just collecting evidence of past successes. I was preparing for immediate action. The most valuable asset I possessed wasn't the historical data. It was the ongoing client relationships that I'd built through years of exceptional service and results. My phone started ringing at 8:30 a.m. The first call was from David Martinez, Meridian Electronics marketing director. He'd heard rumors about changes at Pinnacle and wanted to confirm that I'd still be handling their account. The concern in his voice was unmistakable. David had explicitly told Harrison, multiple times, that Meridian's relationship with Pinnacle was built on their confidence in my strategic expertise. "Marcus, I need to be direct with you," David said. Meridian chose Pinnacle because of the work you did for us. If you're not going to be our primary contact anymore, we need to have some serious conversations about our contract. This was exactly the scenario I'd anticipated. I gave David a carefully neutral response, assuring him that I was committed to Meridian's continued success, while avoiding any specifics about my employment situation. But I could hear the uncertainty in his voice, and I knew he'd be watching the situation closely. Similar calls came throughout the morning from contacts at Cascade Outdoor Gear, North Star Financial, and 2 other major accounts. Word travels fast in the marketing world, especially when companies start making dramatic personnel changes. My clients were nervous, and they had every right to be. At 10 a.m., I received a text message from Harrison. See me in my office immediately. I walked into Harrison's corner office, with complete composure, carrying a folder containing copies of all the documentation I'd gathered. He was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, wearing one of his $3,000 suits, and an expression that suggested he expected me to grovel or plead for mercy. Marcus, I assume you received my email about your compensation adjustment, he began, using the same corporate tone from his message. I want to assure you that this decision wasn't made lightly, but current market conditions require us to optimize our cost structure. I sat down across from him and placed my folder on the desk. Harrison, let's skip the corporate doublespeak. You cut my salary in half while I'm generating more revenue for this company than any other employee. We both know this has nothing to do with market conditions. His facade cracked slightly. Your compensation has always been generous for your level of experience. This adjustment brings you more in line with industry standards for industry standards. I interrupted, opening my folder and pulling out salary survey data I'd printed that morning. The average senior digital strategist in Seattle earns. Someone with my track record and client portfolio should be earning closer to one or. You're not adjusting me to industry standards. You're paying me less than entry-level positions at most agencies. Harrison's face flushed, but he maintained his authoritative posture. Marcus, I understand you're disappointed, but this company has invested significantly in your development. Your success here is largely due to the resources and opportunities we've provided. That statement was so absurd that I almost laughed. Harrison, I generated $4.2 million in revenue for Pinnacle last year alone. My campaigns have won industry awards and attracted new clients worth millions more. What exactly has the company invested in my development, beyond basic salary and benefit? The infrastructure, the support staff, the business development, the infrastructure I pay for through billable hours, the support staff, who work for below-market salaries while I generate the revenue that funds their position. The business development consists mainly of me maintaining relationships with clients who specifically requested to work with me. Harrison leaned back in his chair and I could see his strategy shifting. He was realizing that intimidation and corporate rhetoric weren't going to work, so he moved to his backup approach, veiled threats. Marcus, I hope you understand that your employment here is at will. If you're not comfortable with the new compensation structure, you're free to explore other opportunities. Of course, you'll need to honor your non-compete agreement and ensure that all client relationships remain with Pinnacle. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. I pulled out another document from my folder, a legal analysis of my employment contract that I'd commissioned from Sarah's brother, who was an employment attorney. Actually, Harrison, I've had my contract reviewed by legal counsel. The non-compete clause is poorly written and likely unenforceable in Washington state. It's overly broad, lacks consideration beyond basic employment, and contains several provisions that violate state labor laws. Harrison's confidence visibly wavered. That's not accurate. Our legal team assured me. Your legal team probably copied a template from another state without adapting it to Washington's specific requirements. The clause attempting to prevent me from working in digital marketing is particularly problematic, since it would effectively bar me from using my professional skills in any meaningful way. I could see Harrison processing this information, realizing that his primary weapon for keeping employees trapped in exploitative situations might be legally worthless, but I wasn't finished. More importantly, I continued, several of our major clients have specific clauses in their contracts requiring that I personally remain their primary strategic contact. If I'm no longer able to fulfill that role due to your salary reduction forcing me to seek other employment, Those clients have grounds to terminate their contracts without penalty. This was the nuclear option, and Harrison knew. I pulled out copies of the relevant contract clauses from Meridian, Cascade, and North Star, language that their legal teams had insisted on based on their confidence in my specific expertise. "You're threatening me," Harrison said, his voice tight with anger. "I'm informing you of the contractual realities that your salary decision has created. These clients didn't sign with Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, they signed with Pinnacle specifically to access my strategic services. If you make it impossible for me to provide those services at the level they expect, you're jeopardizing relationships worth millions in annual revenue." Harrison stood up and walked to his window, looking out at Elliott Bay while clearly trying to process the corner he'd backed himself into. I remained seated, projecting calm confidence while internally celebrating how perfectly everything was unfolding. "What exactly are you proposing?" he finally asked. "I'm not proposing anything, I'm simply pointing out the consequences of your decision. If you want to cut my salary in half, that's your prerogative as CEO, but you should understand that such a dramatic reduction will inevitably affect my ability to maintain the same level of service for our most valuable clients, and if I were to reconsider the salary adjustment." I shook my head. "Harrison, this conversation has revealed something important about how you view my contributions to this company. Even if you reversed this decision, we'd be right back here again in 6 months or a year, when you decide to implement the next round of optimization." The truth was, I'd already made my decision before walking into his office. The salary cut was just the catalyst I'd been waiting for. Over the past several weeks, I'd been having detailed discussions with Jennifer Rodriguez about joining Apex Creative Group as a partner, bringing my client relationships and expertise to a company that actually valued its employees. But Harrison didn't need to know that yet. I had a more elegant plan in mind, one that would give me maximum leverage while exposing his exploitative practices to everyone who mattered in the Seattle marketing community. "I need some time to consider my options," I told him. "I'll let you know my decision by the end of the week." Harrison nodded, probably thinking he still had a chance to salvage the situation. "Marcus, I hope we can work something out. You're a valuable member of the team." I stood up and collected my documents. "I'm sure we'll figure out what's best for everyone involved." Walking back to my office, I felt a surge of anticipation. Harrison had no idea what was coming, but his greed and arrogance had just triggered a chain of events that would cost him far more than the salary he'd tried to save. The best part was that everything I was about to do would be completely legal, entirely ethical, and absolutely devastating to his plans for selling Pinnacle. The game had officially begun, and I was playing with a much better hand than Harrison realized. The moment I left Harrison's office, I knew the clock was ticking. I had until the end of the week to execute my plan, and every move needed to be calculated perfectly. Harrison thought he held all the cards, but he was about to discover that I'd been playing a completely different game. My first call was to Jennifer Rodriguez at Apex Creative Group. We'd been having preliminary discussions for weeks, but now it was time to get serious. I scheduled a lunch meeting for that same day at El Terrazzo Carmine, a quiet Italian restaurant in Pioneer Square, where we could talk without being overheard by anyone from the marketing community. Jennifer arrived looking professional but curious. She was in her early 40s with silver-streaked black hair, and the kind of confidence that comes from building a successful business from scratch. Apex Creative had grown steadily over 8 years, focusing on sustainable growth and employee satisfaction, rather than maximum profit extraction. "Marcus, you sounded urgent on the phone," she said as we settled into a corner booth. "What's going on?" I explained Harrison's salary cut without going into too much detail about my investigation into Pinnacle's finances. Jennifer's expression grew increasingly incredulous as I described the 50% reduction, and Harrison's expectation that I'd maintain the same performance level. "That's not just unreasonable, it's predatory," she said. "No legitimate agency would treat a revenue-generating strategist that way." "Harrison's either desperate or delusional." "Probably both," I replied. "But here's what I'm thinking. We've discussed the possibility of me joining Apex as a partner. I'm ready to make that move, but I want to do it strategically." Jennifer leaned forward, clearly interested. "What do you have in mind?" I outlined my plan. Instead of simply quitting Pinnacle and joining Apex immediately, I wanted to create a transition period that would maximize the impact on Harrison while giving our clients the best possible outcome. The goal wasn't just revenge, it was building something better while exposing the toxicity of Harrison's business model. My client contracts contain clauses requiring my personal involvement, I explained. If I leave abruptly, it creates chaos for everyone. But if we approach this methodically, we can offer these clients a smoother transition to Apex, while demonstrating the difference between exploitative and ethical business practices. Jennifer was intrigued but cautious. Marcus, I appreciate your strategic thinking, but I won't be party to anything that could be considered corporate sabotage or contract interference. Apex has built its reputation on integrity, and I won't compromise that. I wouldn't ask you to, I assured her. Everything I'm proposing is completely above board. I'm not planning to steal clients or breach any contracts. I'm simply going to make it clear to Harrison that his decision has consequences, and offer our mutual clients alternatives if they become dissatisfied with Pinnacle's service. We spent the next hour working through the details. Jennifer agreed to fast-track the partnership discussions, contingent on a clean transition that wouldn't expose Apex to legal liability. She was particularly interested in my client relationships with tech companies and outdoor brands, which aligned perfectly with Apex's target market. The partnership terms were generous, significantly better than anything I could have negotiated while employed at Pinnacle. Jennifer was offering a 25% ownership stake, profit sharing, and creative control over strategic direction for new accounts. My base compensation would be $140,000 annually, with performance bonuses that could push total earnings well above $200,000. Jennifer asked as we finished lunch. I need to handle this properly, I said. Give me 2 weeks to transition my responsibilities and ensure clients aren't left hanging. I owe them that much, even if I don't owe Harrison anything. Jennifer nodded approvingly. That's exactly the approach I'd expect from someone joining Apex. Client relationships are built on trust, and trust requires consistency, even during difficult transition. Walking back to Pinnacle's offices, I felt a surge of excitement about the future combined with anticipation about the immediate challenges ahead. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. I had a superior alternative lined up. Now it was time for Phase 2, demonstrating to Harrison exactly what his greed was going to cost him. My afternoon was packed with client calls, but these weren't routine check-ins. I was strategically reaching out to key contacts at major accounts to discuss their upcoming projects and long-term strategic needs. The conversations were professional and focused on their business objectives, but I was also carefully gauging their satisfaction with Pinnacle's current service levels. The call with David Martinez at Meridian Electronics was particularly revealing. Their Q4 campaign was launching in 3 weeks, and David had specific concerns about execution details that required my direct involvement. Marcus, I'll be honest with you, David said. We've been hearing rumors about organizational changes at Pinnacle. Meridian's board is very happy with our current results, but they're nervous about continuity. Our contract specifically names you as the primary strategic contact, because that was essential for our approval of this partnership. This was the opening I'd been hoping for. David, I appreciate your directness. There have been some internal discussions about resource allocation, but my commitment to Meridian's success hasn't changed. However, I think it would be valuable for us to discuss contingency planning to ensure your campaigns continue meeting expectations, regardless of any organizational changes. Well, if circumstances ever required transitioning your account to a different agency, we'd want to ensure minimal disruption to your ongoing strategies. I've been thinking about how to structure that kind of transition to protect your interest. David was immediately interested. The corporate world is full of uncertainties, and smart executives always appreciate having backup plans. We scheduled a follow-up meeting for later in the week to discuss strategic continuity planning, a euphemism that allowed us to explore alternatives without explicitly violating my current employment obligation. Similar conversations took place with contacts at Cascade Outdoor Gear, North Star Financial, and 2 smaller but profitable accounts. In each case, I positioned the discussion around their business continuity needs, rather than my employment situation. But the message was clear. If they valued working with me specifically, they should be prepared for potential changes at Pinnacle. By Thursday afternoon, I had meetings scheduled with representatives from all my major clients. Officially, these were strategy sessions and project review. Unofficially, they were opportunities to present alternatives if Pinnacle's service quality declined due to Harrison's cost-cutting measures. Meanwhile, Harrison was growing increasingly agitated. He'd been expecting me to either accept the salary cut, quietly, or come crawling back with a desperate counter-proposal. Instead, I was maintaining my professional demeanor while clearly preparing for something he couldn't quite identify. His anxiety became obvious during the Thursday morning staff meeting. Harrison announced additional efficiency measures that included outsourcing some creative work to freelancers and implementing new project management software designed to optimize workflow. The real purpose was increasing surveillance of employee activities and reducing costs by replacing skilled staff with cheaper alternatives. These changes will help us stay competitive in a challenging market, Harrison explained to the assembled team. We're also evaluating our current project allocations to ensure optimal resource utilization. The corporate jargon was nauseating, but I recognized the underlying message. Harrison was preparing to redistribute my client responsibilities among junior staff members and freelancers, hoping to maintain revenue while eliminating my higher salary. It was a desperate move that showed how little he understood about client relationship management. After the meeting, I cornered Harrison near his office. "Can we talk privately about the resource allocation changes you mentioned?" He led me into his office, clearly hoping I was ready to negotiate. "Marcus, I'm glad you want to discuss this constructively. I think we can find a solution that works for everyone." "I'm sure we can," I replied, sitting across from his desk. "I've been reviewing my client portfolios and thinking about transition strategy. If you're planning to reassign my accounts, we should discuss the best approach for maintaining client satisfaction." Harrison looked confused. "I haven't made any final decisions about reassignments. Your salary adjustment doesn't necessarily mean..." "Harrison, let's be realistic. You've cut my compensation in half while expecting the same performance level. That's not sustainable for anyone involved. If you're planning changes, I'd rather help implement them properly than watch client relationships suffer due to poor planning." This wasn't the conversation Harrison had expected. He'd anticipated resistance, negotiation, or capitulation, not professional cooperation with his cost-cutting agenda. My willingness to discuss transition planning was making him nervous because it suggested I had alternatives he didn't know about. "What kind of transition strategies are you thinking about?" he asked cautiously. "Well, each account has different needs and relationship dynamics. Meridian Electronics, for example, has very specific requirements about strategic continuity. Their contract language reflects that. If you're planning to transition their account to someone else, we'd need to carefully manage that process to avoid triggering any contractual complication." I pulled out copies of the relevant contract clauses and spread them on Harrison's desk. "See this section? It requires written notification of any changes to the primary strategic contact, with a 30-day transition period and approval from their marketing director. If they're not satisfied with the proposed replacement, they have the right to terminate without penalty." Harrison's face went pale as he read the contract language. He'd never paid close attention to these details because he'd assumed client relationships belonged to the company rather than individual employees. "How many accounts have similar provisions?" he asked. "Most of them. Cascade Outdoor Gear has even stronger language. They can terminate immediately if I'm no longer available to oversee their campaign. North Star Financial requires quarterly strategy reviews with me personally, and they've made it clear that my departure would trigger a comprehensive evaluation of their Pinnacle relationship." Harrison was beginning to understand the scope of his problem. By cutting my salary, he'd created a situation where his most valuable clients might abandon Pinnacle entirely. The cost savings from reducing my compensation would be meaningless if it triggered the loss of millions in annual revenue. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. "I'm suggesting that you think carefully about the real cost of your decision. If maintaining these client relationships requires my continued involvement at a professional compensation level, that might be more cost-effective than dealing with account terminations and revenue loss." Harrison leaned back in his chair, clearly calculating the financial implications, but I could see in his expression that his pride and stubbornness were overriding his business sense. He'd committed to the salary cut as part of his broader cost reduction strategy, and backing down would undermine his authority. "Marcus, I understand your concerns, but I can't reverse personnel decisions based on threats about client departure. If these clients are truly loyal to Pinnacle, they'll adapt to necessary changes." That response told me everything I needed to know. Harrison was willing to gamble millions in revenue rather than admit he'd made a mistake. His arrogance and ego were more important to him than sound business judgment. "I understand your position," I said, gathering up the contract copies. "I'll make sure to handle the transition planning as professionally as possible." Walking back to my office, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. Harrison had just made the final decision that would destroy his plans for selling Pinnacle. He was about to learn that client loyalty in the marketing business is earned through relationships and results, not corporate ownership. Friday morning arrived with crystal clarity about what needed to happen next. I had meetings scheduled with all my major clients, partnership papers ready to sign with Apex Creative, and a resignation letter drafted that would protect me legally while maximizing the impact on Harrison's business. The end game was beginning, and Harrison still had no idea what was about to hit him. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that makes Seattle feel electric with possibility. As I walked through the glass doors of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions for what would be my final day, I carried a leather portfolio containing documents that would reshape everything Harrison Blackwood thought he knew about business loyalty and employee retention. The resignation letter tucked inside wasn't just a standard 2 weeks notice. I'd spent 3 days crafting a document that would serve multiple purposes: provide legal protection, maintain professional standards, and deliver psychological impact that would haunt Harrison for months. Every word had been chosen to appear gracious while subtly highlighting the catastrophic nature of his decision. My 9 a.m. meeting with David Martinez from Meridian Electronics took place at Victrola Coffee on Capitol Hill, deliberately chosen for its distance from downtown and the marketing district where industry gossip travels faster than wildfire. David arrived looking like a man who'd spent considerable time weighing difficult decisions, his usual confident demeanor replaced by cautious concern. "Marcus, I've been losing sleep over our conversation yesterday," David began, settling into the worn leather armchair across from mine. "Meridian's board held an emergency session last night to discuss our marketing partnerships. The consensus was unanimous: we can't afford uncertainty in our strategic direction, especially with the product launches we have planned for Q." I opened my portfolio and extracted a detailed presentation I'd prepared specifically for this moment. The document contained 18 months of campaign performance data, ROI analyses, and strategic projections that painted an undeniable picture of success under my leadership. "David, I completely understand your position," I said, sliding the presentation across the small table. "What I'm about to share represents a solution that addresses Meridian's continuity concerns, while potentially improving your results and reducing costs." The presentation opened with side-by-side comparisons between Pinnacle's current pricing structure and Apex Creative Group's more transparent fee arrangement. Where Harrison charged $45,000 monthly with hidden markups and mysterious administrative fees, Apex offered comprehensive services for $38,000 with complete transparency about resource allocation and cost breakdowns. "This is remarkable," David said, studying the financial projection. "You're telling me we could get better service for less money?" "Better service, lower costs, and guaranteed continuity," I confirmed. "Apex operates on a partnership model rather than a client-vendor relationship. Your success becomes our success because our compensation is directly tied to performance outcomes, rather than billable hours." I pulled out testimonials from other tech companies that had worked with Jennifer Rodriguez's team, including detailed case studies showing average performance improvements of 40% after transitioning from traditional agencies to Apex's collaborative approach. David's interest was obvious, but he raised the concern I'd anticipated. "What about the transition logistics? Meridian can't afford any disruption to our current campaigns, especially with the holiday season approaching." This question allowed me to reveal the most compelling aspect of my preparation. I'd spent weeks developing a seamless transition protocol that would actually improve Meridian's campaign performance during the changeover period. The transition would be invisible to your customers, I explained, opening to a detailed timeline chart. Apex has already reviewed your current strategies and prepared enhanced versions of every campaign element. We could implement improvements while maintaining complete continuity of messaging and audience targeting. The timeline showed a 3-week transition period where both agencies would operate simultaneously, with Apex gradually taking over responsibilities while Pinnacle wound down their involvement. Every potential point of failure had been identified and addressed with specific contingency plans. We've also prepared enhanced versions of your Q1 product launch strategies, I added, showing David mock-ups and campaign concepts that built on his current approach while incorporating more sophisticated targeting and engagement techniques. David spent 20 minutes reviewing the materials, asking increasingly detailed questions about implementation, cost structures, and performance guarantees. His excitement grew as he realized that switching agencies wouldn't just solve his continuity concerns, it would actually accelerate Meridian's marketing effectiveness. "Marcus, this is exactly what we need," he said finally. "How quickly can we move forward?" Apex is prepared to begin immediately. Jennifer Rodriguez is meeting with 2 other potential partners this afternoon, but Meridian would be our priority client. We could have transition documents ready by Monday and begin enhanced campaign execution by Wednesday. David pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly. "I'm scheduling an emergency board call for this afternoon. Based on what you've shown me, I expect unanimous approval for the transition. Can you have Jennifer send me formal proposal documents by 2?" The meeting concluded with David's verbal commitment to recommend the agency change to Meridian's board. As we shook hands outside the coffee shop, he made a comment that perfectly captured the situation's irony. "You know, Marcus, Harrison probably thought cutting your salary would save money. Instead, he's about to lose his biggest client and watch his competition get stronger. That's not just poor business judgment, it's self-destructive stupidity." My afternoon was packed with similar meetings across Seattle. The Cascade outdoor gear discussion took place at REI's flagship store, where their marketing director, Lisa Chen, met me surrounded by the products we'd helped transform from struggling inventory into bestseller. "Marcus, I'll be completely direct," Lisa said, as we walked past displays featuring gear from our award-winning campaigns. "Cascade's relationship with Pinnacle has always been a relationship with you personally. Your strategic vision and hands-on involvement are the only reasons we've stayed with that agency." I showed Lisa the same presentation I'd shared with David, but customized for Cascade's unique position in the outdoor gear market. The numbers were even more compelling. Apex's outdoor industry expertise and established influencer relationships could reduce their marketing costs by 35%, while expanding their reach into demographic segments that Pinnacle had never successfully targeted. "We've identified 12 outdoor lifestyle influencers who align perfectly with Cascade's brand values," I explained, showing Lisa detailed audience analysis reports. "These aren't just sponsored content opportunities, they're authentic partnerships that would generate ongoing brand advocacy." Lisa was particularly impressed by Apex's approach to sustainability messaging, which had become increasingly important to Cascade's environmentally conscious customer base. Where Pinnacle treated sustainability as a marketing checkbox, Apex had developed comprehensive strategies for companies genuinely committed to environmental responsibility. "This aligns perfectly with our corporate values," Lisa said, reviewing case studies from other outdoor companies. "We've been frustrated with Pinnacle's superficial approach to our environmental messaging. This looks like genuine strategic thinking." The meeting with Northstar Financial's team took place in their downtown offices, where I presented the most sophisticated proposal of the day. Financial services marketing requires regulatory compliance and risk management expertise that many agencies lack, but Apex had developed specialized capabilities through their work with fintech startups and regional banks. "Your current compliance review process takes 6 weeks," I told the 3-person Northstar team. Apex has streamlined that to 10 days through partnerships with specialized legal firms and automated compliance checking systems. The proposal included innovative approaches to financial education content, regulatory compliance social media strategies, and sophisticated lead nurturing systems that would improve their client acquisition costs by an estimated By 5 p.m., I had verbal commitments from clients representing $4.2 million in annual revenue, even more than my initial projections. The smaller accounts I'd met with were equally enthusiastic, particularly after learning about Apex's transparent pricing and performance-based compensation model. Walking back to Pinnacle's offices, I felt the satisfying weight of documents that would demolish Harrison's world. My resignation letter was signed and dated, my transition materials were comprehensive and professional, and my new partnership agreement with Apex was finalized. Harrison was in his office, visible through the glass walls, gesticulating wildly during what appeared to be a heated phone conversation. I knocked and waited for his irritated wave to enter. "I'll call you back," he snapped into the phone before turning to face me. "Marcus, I hope you've reconsidered your position. I've been thinking about ways to restructure your compensation package." I placed my resignation letter on his desk without ceremony. "Harrison, I've made my decision. I'm providing formal notice of my resignation, effective 2 weeks from today." Harrison's confident expression crumbled as he read the letter. The document was masterfully written, grateful for opportunities while citing fundamental differences in compensation philosophy and strategic direction as reasons for departure. "Marcus, this is completely unnecessary," Harrison said, his voice betraying rising panic. "I can restore your full salary immediately. We can discuss profit-sharing arrangements, additional vacation time, whatever you need." "I appreciate the offer, but I've already accepted a partnership position with Apex Creative Group," I replied, handing him a copy of my signed partnership agreement. Harrison's face went through several color changes as he processed the implications. "Apex Creative Group, that's Jennifer Rodriguez's company. This is a direct competitive conflict." "Actually, it's not. Jennifer and I have been completely transparent about this transition. Every client conversation I've had has been focused on their business continuity needs, not competitive recruitment." I pulled out my phone and showed Harrison the meeting requests I'd received throughout the day. Meridian Electronics wanted to schedule a strategic partnership review for Monday morning. Cascade Outdoor Gear had requested an urgent consultation about alternative marketing approaches. North Star Financial needed to discuss enhanced service options. "Harrison, I need to inform you that several clients have expressed serious concerns about recent organizational changes at Pinnacle. They're evaluating their options for ensuring continued strategic support." The blood drained from Harrison's face as he realized what was happening. "You've been recruiting our clients. This is corporate espionage. I've been responding professionally to legitimate client inquiries about service continuity," I corrected. "When clients express concerns about organizational stability and ask about alternatives, providing honest information is my professional obligation." Harrison stood up and began pacing frantically. "How many clients are we talking about?" "Clients representing approximately $4.2 million in annual revenue have indicated strong interest in transitioning to providers who can guarantee consistent strategic leadership." Harrison stopped pacing and stared at me in shock. That's 2/3 of our total billing." "Yes, it is." The silence stretched between us as Harrison processed the magnitude of his miscalculation. His attempt to save $47,500 annually by cutting my salary was about to cost him over $4 million in revenue. "Marcus, surely we can negotiate something. I'll double your salary, give you equity in the company, whatever it takes." "Harrison, this isn't about money anymore. Your decision revealed how you fundamentally view the people who generate this company's success. Even if you reversed every change, we'd be in the same position again whenever you decided to implement the next round of cost optimizations." I placed my transition documentation on his desk, detailed handover materials for every client account, project timelines, contact information, and strategic recommendations for maintaining relationships during the transition period. I've prepared comprehensive transition materials to ensure minimal disruption to ongoing projects. The junior staff members are talented people who could potentially maintain some of these relationships with proper support and resources. Harrison picked up the transition documents with trembling hands. "Marcus, what about the company sale? We've been working toward this for months. I imagine potential buyers will be very interested in discussing a company that's just lost 2/3 of its revenue base due to management decisions." I replied, "That should make for fascinating due diligence conversations." Walking toward the door, I turned back for one final observation. Harrison, you built this company by attracting talented people and successful clients. But you never understood that success in this industry is built on relationships and trust, not ownership and control. When you treat expertise as a commodity and relationships as company property, you discover how quickly both can disappear. I left Harrison sitting alone in his office, surrounded by resignation letters and client departure notices that represented the complete collapse of everything he'd worked to build. The following 2 weeks were a masterclass in professional transition management. Despite my personal feelings about Harrison, I maintained complete professionalism during the handover process. Every client received detailed briefings about ongoing projects, strategic timelines, and recommended next steps for continued success. However, my professionalism couldn't prevent the inevitable client departures. Meridian Electronics terminated their contract on Monday morning, citing concerns about strategic continuity and organizational stability. Cascade Outdoor Gear followed on Tuesday, requesting immediate transfer of all campaign assets and intellectual property. The domino effect was devastating and swift. By Wednesday, Northstar Financial had announced their intention to conclude their relationship with Pinnacle at the earliest contractually permissible date. The two smaller accounts followed by Friday, both expressing concerns about the agency's ability to provide consistent service during the transition period. Harrison made increasingly desperate attempts to stem the departure. He offered dramatic fee reductions, assigned his most senior remaining staff to the departing accounts, and even hired expensive consultants to develop client retention strategies. But the damage was irreversible. The clients had lost confidence in Pinnacle's leadership and strategic direction. The most revealing moment came during my final week when I overheard Harrison on a conference call with potential buyers for the company. His voice was strained and defensive as he tried to explain the sudden revenue decline and client departure. These are temporary setbacks related to personnel transitions. He was saying, the underlying business fundamentals remain strong, and we expect to replace this revenue within 6 months through new business development. The skeptical questions from the buyers were audible even from outside his office. They wanted detailed explanations for the client departures, copies of exit interviews, and comprehensive analyses of the company's competitive position following the personnel change. One buyer asked the question that perfectly captured Harrison's predicament. If these client relationships were built on individual expertise rather than company value, what prevents future departures when other key employees leave? Harrison had no answer because there wasn't one. He'd built a business model that depended on underpaying talented people while overcharging clients for their expertise. The moment those people found better opportunities, the entire structure collapsed. My final day at Pinnacle was surreal. The office felt hollow, with several empty desks where laid-off employees had worked and a general atmosphere of uncertainty among the remaining staff. Harrison had called an all-hands meeting to announce strategic restructuring and new growth opportunities, but everyone understood they were witnessing the slow-motion collapse of the company. During my exit interview, Harrison made one last attempt at reconciliation. Marcus, I want you to know that I've learned from this experience. Maybe we approached the compensation issue incorrectly. Harrison, the compensation cut wasn't an isolated mistake. It was the logical conclusion of how you've always viewed employees. You saw us as cost to be minimized rather than assets to be developed. I was trying to prepare the company for acquisition. Buyers want to see efficient operations and strong profit margins. And now those same buyers are seeing massive client departures and organizational instability. How do you think that's affecting your acquisition prospects? Harrison winced visibly. The acquisition discussions have been suspended indefinitely. Potential buyers want to see at least 6 months of stable operations before resuming negotiation. I felt a deep satisfaction hearing this confirmation of my strategy's success, but I maintained a neutral expression. That's unfortunate. I'm sure you'll find a way to rebuild. As I prepared to leave, I placed one final document on Harrison's desk. A comprehensive analysis of Pinnacle's financial structure that I'd prepared as a parting gift. The report detailed exactly how much money he'd been extracting from the company through excessive executive compensation, personal expenses disguised as business costs, and profit distributions that should have been reinvested in employee development. This might help you understand why your cost-cutting approach was destined to fail. I said, sustainable businesses invest in their most valuable assets. Companies that treat people as expendable resources usually discover that expertise and client relationships are more portable than anticipated. Harrison looked at the document with a mixture of anger and resignation. You orchestrated this entire situation, didn't you? I prepared for the possibility that you might make exactly the kind of short-sighted decision you made. When someone consistently demonstrates their values through their actions, it's prudent to plan accordingly. Walking out of Pinnacle's offices for the final time, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation mixed with satisfaction. Harrison's greed and arrogance had cost him everything he'd been working toward, while my career was about to reach heights I'd never imagined possible. The transition to Apex Creative Group exceeded every expectation. Jennifer Rodriguez had assembled a team of professionals who genuinely believed in collaborative success rather than zero-sum competition. My former clients were thriving under the new partnership structure, with campaign performance metrics showing consistent improvements across all major accounts. 3 months after leaving Pinnacle, I received an update from David Martinez at Meridian Electronics. Their Q4 campaigns had generated the best results in company history, with online sales increasing 85% over the previous year, and brand awareness reaching all-time high. Marcus, I have to tell you, switching to Apex was transformative for our entire marketing approach, David said during our quarterly review meeting. The difference in strategic thinking and execution quality has been remarkable. We're not just getting better results, we're learning and improving our internal capabilities through the partnership. Cascade Outdoor Gear launched 3 new product lines ahead of schedule, supported by influencer partnerships and content strategies that generated organic buzz worth millions in equivalent advertising value. Northstar Financial streamlined their client acquisition process so effectively that they expanded into 2 new markets 6 months ahead of their original timeline. The professional satisfaction was incredible, but the personal vindication was even sweeter. Harrison's attempt to exploit my dedication and expertise had backfired spectacularly, resulting in consequences that extended far beyond the immediate financial loss. 6 months after my departure, industry contacts informed me that Harrison had been forced to lay off 60% of Pinnacle's remaining staff and was desperately seeking buyers for the company's assets. The once thriving agency had become a cautionary tale within Seattle's marketing community about the importance of employee retention and ethical leadership. The acquisition offers that had once valued Pinnacle at $18 million based on its client relationships and revenue streams had evaporated entirely. The company was now worth perhaps $2 million as a distressed asset sale, primarily for its office lease and remaining equipment. The most ironic aspect of the entire situation was the mathematical precision of Harrison's miscalculation. His attempt to save $47,500 annually by cutting my salary had ultimately cost him approximately $16 million in lost company value, destroyed acquisition opportunities worth millions more, and permanently damaged his reputation within the industry. Meanwhile, my partnership with Apex Creative Group was generating annual earnings that exceeded $200,000, with profit-sharing arrangements that could push total compensation above $300,000 as the company continued growing. The financial rewards were satisfying, but the professional fulfillment of working with people who valued expertise and collaboration was invaluable. Sarah and I celebrated my 1-year anniversary at Apex with dinner at Canlis, the same restaurant where Harrison used to take potential buyers to discuss Pinnacle's acquisition prospects. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. You know what I find most satisfying about this whole experience? Sarah asked as we enjoyed dessert overlooking Elliott Bay. What's that? Harrison thought he was being clever by exploiting your work ethic and client relationship, but he never understood that those same qualities would make you incredibly successful once you found an organization that actually valued them. She was absolutely right. The dedication and strategic thinking that Harrison had taken for granted at Pinnacle became the foundation for something far more rewarding and sustainable. His betrayal had forced me to recognize my own worth and take control of my career in ways that transformed not just my professional life, but my entire perspective on business relationships. 1 year later, I learned through mutual contacts that Harrison had finally found a buyer for Pinnacle's remaining asset. A larger agency had purchased the client list, office equipment, and brand name for $1.8 million, less than what Harrison had personally extracted from the company during his final year of ownership. The buyer's due diligence had revealed the full extent of Harrison's financial mismanagement, including the excessive personal expenses, inflated executive compensation, and complete lack of employee development investment that had created the conditions for the mass departure. But perhaps the most fitting conclusion to the entire saga came when Jennifer Rodriguez received a call from the agency that had purchased Pinnacle's assets. They were struggling to rebuild the client relationships and were interested in hiring Apex as a strategic consultant to help restore their reputation in the Seattle market. "It's fascinating," Jennifer told me after declining their offer. "They're essentially asking us to fix the damage that Harrison's leadership style created. They want to pay us to teach them how to build the kind of sustainable client relationships that Harrison destroyed through his greed." Looking back on the entire experience, I realized that Harrison's salary cut was actually the catalyst for the best career decision I've ever made. His short-sighted attempt to maximize profits revealed his true character and motivated me to seek opportunities that aligned with my values and ambitions. The lesson is clear. Sustainable success in any industry is built on trust, mutual respect, and shared value creation. Leaders who try to maximize short-term profits by exploiting talented people inevitably discover that expertise, relationships, and reputation are more portable than they anticipated. Harrison learned that lesson the most expensive way possible, while I built a thriving career on the foundation of his mistake. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about building something so much better that their pettiness becomes irrelevant. In the end, Harrison's greed cost him everything he'd worked to build, while my commitment to ethical business practices and genuine client service created opportunities beyond anything I'd imagined possible. The moral of the story is simple but powerful: treat people well, or be prepared to lose them to someone who will. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest upload.